Hello and welcome to this telesummit on feminism as a sustainability tool. I'm Jenny Lamorgan, a social entrepreneur and owner of greenwomanstore.com, where we enjoy creating educational tools like this telesummit on topics important to us as women. I'm excited to be here with our co-host, Carolyn Gage, to bring you experts on the topic of feminism. And we have case studies from the U.S. and around the world. These two collective quests, feminism and sustainability, touch every aspect of our lives. Feminism has always brought hope, a lot of work, and truth to every issue it touches. These are difficult times around the world, so we'll talk about the hopelessness and the powerlessness that we feel. We'll talk about the sustainability of feminism and the important role that feminism plays in a real and lasting global sustainability. Our goal is to bring you hope for the future and an expanded global reality. We can trust Carolyn Gage to facilitate these truths with clarity and grace. Carolyn is a lesbian feminist playwright, performer, director, and activist. She is the author of 12 books and more than 65 plays, musicals, and one-woman shows. She specializes in non-traditional roles for women and reclaims famous women's stories that have been distorted or erased from our history. In 2014, Carolyn was one of 6 featured playwrights at the 53rd Annual World Theater Day in Rome, sponsored by UNESCO. And now I'd like to introduce you to our guest, who will talk to us about maternal health and why are the mothers dying. Rita Henley Jensen is founder and editor-in-chief of Women's eNews. She has more than 30 years' experience in journalism and is a prize-winning investigative reporter. Rita launched women'senews.org in June of 2000. She's extremely proud of the 40 awards Women's eNews has received, including the Casey Medal for Meritorious Journalism, the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism Alumni Award, the Hunter College Presidential Grant for Innovative Uses of Technology in Teaching, the Alicia Patterson Fellowship, and the Lloyd P. Burns Public Service Prize. Rita Henley Jensen is also a survivor of domestic violence and a former welfare mother who has earned degrees from Ohio State University and Columbia Graduate School of Journalism. She is the grandmother of 2 granddaughters and 2 grandsons. And now I'll turn the mic over to Carolyn. Enjoy this discussion. Welcome, Carolyn Gage.
Yeah, so it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a great privilege to be able to interview Rita Henley Jensen. Well, one of the things that we've been talking about was how the Women's eNews focuses on different stories than mainstream press, and there's one very important story that the Women's eNews broke, and I would love for you to tell us about that.
Well, thank you, Carolyn. I'm so pleased you invited me to participate. The story that we're talking about is a story we've been working on since 2007, if you can believe it, and we're still very interested in it and turning up new angles. And what possible story could that be? Maternal mortality and morbidity, not overseas, but in the U.S. And in the United States is the only developed nation that has a rising maternal mortality rate. That is, the amount or whatever the proportion of women dying as a result of being pregnant. It's really startling, and we started in 2007 with a grant from the Kellogg Foundation, and they asked us to focus on African American health because, first of all, African American infants die more often than white infants in the first year of their lives, and African American women die 3 to 4 times more often than white women as a result of being pregnant. Okay, so we started and we published stories, I would say, using the conventional wisdom, which is basically it was their fault. Oh, they should watch their salt intake. They should get to their prenatal care regularly. They should take long walks to reduce their blood pressure and eat better, salads and vegetables and blah, blah, blah. So it was all sort of focused on what's, their misbehavior and how they could change their behavior to minimize the risk that they were facing. And yet that bothered me. I'm like, there's got to be more to this story. So I'm on the phone with head of statistics for the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, and I asked, I'm bothered that I say, well, the World Health Organization says that the U.S. has this rate of maternal mortality, and your agency says it's much lower. Who should I believe in? He said, well, I would go with the World Health Organization, which took me back, right? And he openly said that the CDC did not have good statistics.
Wow.
With that, I know. Then we realized, and he explained, that they had not published, and this is 2011, I believe, the data about maternal mortality in the U.S. since 2007. Well, why not? I mean, that, as I think most of your readers and your listeners will know, the maternal mortality rate is not only about how healthy pregnant women are or are not, but it's at what they call a sentinel event. That if you have a high maternal mortality rate, it indicates that you have a lousy healthcare system, basically. People are going.
I think you might be on why they haven't been publishing, but
yes. So, well, yes, it is an indictment of our healthcare system currently, and we don't know. We hope that what they call is Obamacare, and I call the Affordable Care Act, because it holds a lot of promise to improve women's health. But so we went back to this guy, and he explains, why they haven't published the data since 2011, and basically this is what he has to say, that the current system, I mean, as everybody knows, we have 50 states, and they all do things their way, and there's nothing. So that's the first point. There's no consistency in the way to report a maternal death. And again, a maternal death is an indication that things are awry, and as well as a tragedy, because a mother who dies in childbirth often leaves a living infant, which we all understand is a severe blow to the family. Okay, so there's no consistency. According to the CDC, they try to bring consistency to the counting by, and I hope you don't get bored, but by adding a checkbox to the death certificates that every state would use that said this woman was, or who died, was or was not pregnant within a year of the death. And they say a year because you have to wonder about that, but the reason they now use the year is what they call the morbidity rate. In other words, you may survive the labor, but you could be so grievously harmed that sometime over that year you would die from the experience. And so that's how people are counting it. Okay, but states refuse to do it. And
now, why is that? Just unwillingness to change the way business as usual, or something?
Well, we didn't ask every state, but it's oh, we're redesigning it anyway, and we have to redesign our software, and we have to get everybody on board, and we have to train people, and whatever the reasons are. But this has been since 2007.
I kind of just want to cut into the conversation here, because it's reminding me of one of the very first plays I ever wrote, which was about thalidomide. And the reason we didn't have the terrible birth defect situation that South America and Europe had was there was one woman in the FDA keeping it out, and she kept insisting, I'm not seeing any fetal testing of this drug. I'm not seeing testing with, pregnant women. And the boys, and of course the FDA was a boys' club, as were the drug companies. This was the early 1960s, I believe. They would just roll their eyes like, so like a woman, to be all about maternity, as if there's something unscientific about that. And of course, had they done the fetal testing, there would have been so much less suffering. That's a horrendous drug, and sadly, it was being given to pregnant women because it was a sedative, and women in late pregnancy have difficulty sleeping. So it was particularly tragic that pregnant women were targeted to be marketed to for this. But it was that when you say why do you think they're so reluctant to change the system? It's a checkbox, for crying out loud. We're not asking them to redo all their forms.
I know.
But I think it's the same thing that they ran into with it. It just reminds me of that mindset, the eye roll, like fetal testing, eye roll, like what, only a woman would care about that.
And for God's sakes, I mean, if it were a priority, then it could get done.
If our athletes, if our football players had the highest mortality rate, trust me, there would be study after study. Yes. I mean,
trust me. And I mean, and also, let's just take this a little further. All the emphasis on now, African American women also are more likely to have preemies and low birth weight infants. So the answer of our medical care system has been very high tech in keeping the preemies alive and the low birth weight infants, hundreds of thousands of dollars. When you could probably argue that it's better if the mothers are healthy and they don't have the premature or the low birth weight infant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So if we put the emphasis on the maternal care, we could reduce the toll of the premature or low birth weight infant, which is very heavy, and people tell me they often don't live past 5. So they may get them to survive that first year, but that, first of all, they need intensive care from the parents, but they're not likely to have the same health as a child who's born for a full term. So wait a minute, if we did, our focus is wrong, right? And it's not taking away from trying to keep the infants alive. It's like, let's make the moms healthy. That's where the emphasis has to be.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that's a little bit corporate. It kind of, again, it reminds me of another situation where, gross national product, the Exxon oil spill was good for the economy. It created jobs and new technology and blah, 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 because the cost of, there wasn't a monetary value to spoiling the ocean, but
right.
It's the way they do the math. And like you're saying, this doesn't make sense. Let's freight the preventative care end of things, and instead of throwing massive amounts of money after there's been a premature birth. But I'm thinking, yes, but the premature birth is probably contributing to the gross national product with all these
yes,
doctors.
I think yes. I think, and let's back up again. I think yes, you're right. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars in expensive machines, et cetera, contribute to at least the healthcare economy. And we should not be so cynical, but there is part of us who say yes. But on the other hand, if we want healthy mothers, and let's go back to that topic because that's the one that I'm very consumed with. Look, the reason women die is often because related to their pregnancy is embolisms, infections, hemorrhaging, and pre-eclampsia. And physicians and experts tell me that a full 50% of those maybe it's 48%, but nearly half of those deaths are avoidable. Apparently, embolism, there is a standard practice that you can give a mother under stress, give her a shot to avoid the embolism, hemorrhaging, and infections. Those are what we've heard from a doctor in California and others, is that the hospitals in the United States are not prepared to deal with what they call an obstetric emergency, i.e. hemorrhaging. And infections, well, that's a hospital issue, right?
I want to know why they're not prepared for the obstetric emergency. Isn't that why people go to obstetrical units to have babies? Yes, I thought that was that's a big push about not having a home delivery. What if there's a crisis? You want all this technology there. So I was kind of shocked to hear you say, well, the hospitals aren't really set up to handle that. I'm like, I thought that was the big deal with not doing home
in California, there's a doctor, Dr. Elliot Main, who testified on behalf of at the university where he works at the federal hearings on maternal health, and he said that the OBGYN, whatever, surgical rooms did not have a standard kit to handle obstetric emergencies, and he had designed one. So he's based in the San Francisco area, so they adapted it first. And the story we ran about a month ago, I'll have to look it up, basically those emergency kits are now being adopted throughout California, but nowhere else that I know of.
Wow.
And so Merck, who I've mentioned in our pieces, has committed $50 million worldwide to reduce maternal mortality, and they're focusing on hemorrhaging as well as a leading cause of death among women giving birth. And they're addressing the same issue. They're doing that in New Jersey, where they're based, and in Georgia, which has the highest maternal mortality rate in the United States. No, it's not Mississippi, Louisiana, or Alabama. It's Georgia.
It sounds like the 19th century or something, where, really having a baby was kind of a crapshoot in terms of whether you'd come out of it alive or not. It's shocking to me. It's shocking.
Well, especially since it's rising.
Yeah,
right.
and as you're pointing out, it's not necessary. These are conditions that there are. Well, now, why is it that African American women who are having these embolisms and hemorrhages are receiving inadequate treatment and so many times worse than white women?
Well, I mean that what we believe, and that it's just plain old-fashioned racism. I mean, the studies indicate that African Americans, when they're in pain, they get smaller doses of pain medication because the doctors are worried, that they're really addicts or they're a bit more vulnerable to addiction. And there's all sorts of studies about how African Americans are treated once they enter a white institution. I have to say there's also the role of Medicaid may play a role in this. About half of all the births in the United States are paid for by Medicaid. And if a mother is reliant on Medicaid, does she get inadequate care because she's looked down on, right? And that's poor people's health insurance. She's on the dole. We don't know.
Yes.
And the other thing is the ratio of single mothers. And the what we would call the mass incarceration of Black men. If you don't have a partner, you're under more stress. And if you don't have a partner when you're in labor, you're pretty defenseless. As we all know, I think all of us know that, right? You got to have a partner when you go to the ER or
absolutely, absolutely, yeah. I have done that with several of my women friends having OBGYN surgical procedures, and in every instance there was something that was being pulled at the last minute that they were vulnerable and confused about, and I felt it was very helpful for them to have an advocate who was, for instance, not in a hospital gown with a rear end hanging out and able to advocate. It's very hard to advocate forcefully when
you cannot. You absolutely cannot. And if you're pregnant and this is your first or even your 10th, I mean, it's not a situation where you can advocate for yourself. You need a partner. So if you ask me, I would argue that every pregnant woman needs a midwife and a doula. And if we did that, we would reduce the number of women who die as well as the sick and injured infants.
Well, I want to bring this back to the impact that having a women's news service has, because the focus is different. And as we had talked, abortion is a national conversation. It comes up in every local election, every national election. It's some kind of a flashpoint and touchstone and everything else. But this mortality of mothers is not. And do you see that as that is about who it is who's writing the news and who it is who's publishing the news? That how does that get determined? What becomes the national conversation?
Well, I think if you analyze news media, and there's been a lot of criticism, that basically it likes to cover horse races. It covers sports events, and it covers politics in the so-and-so is head in the polls, and so-and-so is behind in polls, so-and-so has raised this much money, so-and-so has raised that much money. So it's about money, and it's about who's ahead in the polls. And so those candidates who are raising the issue of abortion, then the news media says, well, he and she, they are anti-choice, whatever phrase they use, pro-life, and then they can run over sometimes and get a comment on that, although that's not standard practice. And so that becomes the focus. And then we have so-and-so introducing laws. 100 anti-abortion laws have been introduced since January 1 of this year. 100.
Oh my God! It seems to me,
and so
it's like we have so many real problems, environmental issues, and like this one, how can you be so passionate about abortion and so utterly careless about even recording statistics about the mothers that are dying, that are delivering babies? There's a disconnect there. And
it's a very frightening disconnect. It's a very
It feels to me that, like when the patriarchal males in charge get anxious, their go-to position is control of women, and particularly women's bodies. And it's an emotional thing. It doesn't even make sense. To me, it just feels like something they reach for when they get overwhelmed, or they don't have the answers, or they don't want to deal with the larger, more difficult issues. They just reach for controlling women. And somebody this week introduced a bill about outlawing women's yoga pants or something. It just was, for some reason it seems extremely comforting and reassuring to certain kinds of men when they are able to exert control over women's bodies. It alleviates stress or something. I don't know. It makes no sense to me. But I feel like it is really, for whatever reason, it's one of the reasons why it's critical that women have their own source of news and our own journalists, because we know women journalists are wildly underrepresented, particularly with the quote big papers like the New York Times, and every year report cards come out about how many women reporters they have or how many stories filed by women make it to the paper. And it's by no means 50%. It's not even close. And so, yes.
Yeah, I think also, just let me jump in here, and it's layers within layers, because if you are a female journalist in the newsroom of the Daily News, Washington Post, and Wall Street Journal, or the New York Times, if you become an advocate for covering women's stories, then you lower your the respect you receive from your colleagues, because now you're an advocate. You're not a journalist.
No, boy. Yeah. Yes. Well, that's sort of what happened to the woman in the FDA. She wasn't being a professional looking at comprehensive drug testing. She was some hysterical woman beating the drum for motherhood or something. Her focus removed her from the ranks of being a professional scientist. And, of course, history proved that she was a tremendous heroine, and she did get the Presidential Medal of Honor, but she had a really tough fight. They almost got rid of her. Yeah, I think that's a real problem. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about the founding of the Women's eNews?
I'm happy to. So the year was in 1996. I was on this wonderful fellowship, taking the year off from being the investigative reporter of something called the National Law Journal, which covered, in my beat, was law firms and the business of law firms. And I was having a great time, and I had this wonderful fellowship to take the year off to work on a long-term project. And Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich got together and wrote the so-called welfare reform law. Now we're going to go back. At one point in my life, actually a long point in my life, I was on welfare with 2 kids, and welfare was the only way I would have been able to leave the violent situation where I was, because I didn't have the job skills, the earning capacity to take care of my children by myself, or family support to provide daycare and all of that stuff. So I was so naive that I said, oh, they'll never do that because they'll hurt too many women and children. And I watched the news media cover this national discussion about quote-unquote entitlements. And that, for me, because I knew the territory, meant women and children. But many people, when they hear the word welfare, they think race. They think black men, which do not receive federal welfare because you had to be responsible for children. And some are, of course, but a small percentage. So I didn't think they'd do it, but they did do it. In 1996, Bill Clinton decided that he had to sign this welfare reform law, in order to be reelected in '96, and sign he did. And that, in his campaign promise was to end welfare as we know it. I thought he meant he was going to make it nicer. And again, I was naive. I thought he was a Democrat. He would help women and children, and I was wrong. But the news media pounded, so we have to say racist, because they always use black people when they do a story about welfare, and never really focused on the role of welfare, which was supporting single parents taking care of children alone. And it's not charity, and it's about the reality that if you have children to take care of, you can't do it by yourself. And if you're married, both parties are helping out one way or the other. At least they should be. And welfare was basically a substitute for the fact that some parents, many of whom are men, some parents are either unwilling or unable to care for their children. And, they're in jail, they're sick, they're just mean, so they move to another state, whatever, they're unemployed, whatever the reason is, they have not taken on the responsibility of caring for their child. And so the state did, and that was called welfare. And so what they did at '96 is they changed that so that it was an option for you to receive welfare, and you could only get it for a certain number of years. And that makes no sense, because if you're providing the support that the missing parent is not providing, the child is at least 18 years. And people like curling their hair. It's like, no, this is not charity. This is substituting the support from because the absentee parent is nuts. So the focus of all the news stories were about women and, low-income jobs, et cetera, always women of color, and sometimes men. I was so ashamed of my profession, because they were doing such a lousy job of covering this huge story that was dramatically changed the lives of women and children who do not have, Mr. Cleaver as a co-resident in their home, right? It's like, wait a minute. So I made up my mind that I had to change journalism. So after I finished my fellowship, I tried to freelance stories.
Well, I just want to cut in here. Now, you were on welfare raising your two children, having escaped a domestic violence scenario, and that subsidy enabled you to go on and get 2 degrees, right?
Exactly, it did. But don't tell anybody, because they were so mad, right?
But you're like, this is, it's sort of like, what a wonderful thing. And then you've taken that harrowing experience and been able to contribute such an enormous thing to the culture with the Women's eNews. And with the changed welfare system, it becomes so much more difficult for that woman to escape poverty, to get any kind of training or education that would lift her out of the minimum wage jobs. And like women like you would have been lost to the system. And I just,
absolutely.
Yeah, and I really admire that, there, but for the grace of God, you saw this coming, and you felt strongly enough about that particular issue to walk away from the day job to found a newspaper to really, like you say, change journalism. To me, that's one of the most powerful givebacks, and I thank you for doing that, but I think it just shows such solidarity with the women coming behind you who were not going to have the opportunity that you did. It just seems like an act of tremendous love, and I appreciate that. I just wanted to say that.
Yes, thank you. Well, a tremendous love. Just a sense of basic fairness, and it's like, well, what are you people doing? It's not the mother's fault that she's low income and she's working and she's taking care of the kids. There's this other parent that isn't helping, and I'm sure some of your listeners will say, "Oh yeah, throw the bum in jail." A lot of the child support mechanisms improved dramatically since the days when I was on welfare. Nevertheless, some parents who are not contributing cannot or will not to pay all sorts of games. And whether, if the child support check comes on the 15th of the month instead of the 1st of the month, that makes a big difference. As I like to say, children like to eat every single day.
Yeah.
So it makes a difference, right? And if so, a child support check is slow. One of the stories I did while I was freelancing before I started Women's eNews was this really complicated mechanism, but maybe not, in that missing absentee fathers are obligated, if the mother is receiving welfare, of sending the child support to the county, and then the county takes the cash portion that they've sent the mother out of that check, and they're supposed to send the balance to the mother. And then if the mother leaves welfare and they still receive the child support check, they're supposed to forward the whole thing. You will be surprised to learn, and it was then, and I haven't done any reporting recently, and I invite somebody else to let me do the reporting in their own county and let me know that the bookkeeping system wasn't up to par.
And what a surprise. What a surprise.
And the counties accidentally kept keeping the money.
Yeah, that does not surprise me at all. Well, I want you to, I don't want to run out of time before we've thoroughly covered the amazing thing that is the Women's eNews. I'm on the website right now, and I just want to say Jenny read out the list of awards and everything that it has received, very prestigious journalism awards. But, it's a beautiful website. This is
Thank you.
womensenews.org, very easy to find. I'm sure if you just Google Women's eNews, you'll get there.
Home,
but there's like this, it's, you've got all these divisions, the culture and tradition, under which is arts, our history, religion, and then, media, and then perspectives and views, which looks fascinating, political, work and labor, justice, health, science. It's just, I'm looking at today's feature, and it's a lovely, very upbeat article. Valentine's Day is rosier for same-sex teen romance.
I know, right?
Yeah, there's a lovely online video that Hallmark has of two lesbians talking sort of about how they love each other. That is, for someone of my generation, inconceivable, Hallmark being so mainstream. Yeah, and then, you also, and this is free to sign up for, but you wanted also to talk about the gala that you're having, which is right there on that first page. You can click on it.
Yes, thank you.
And this is called 21 Leaders for the 21st Century. And I know several of these women personally, and I was just like, oh, my God, I wish I was in New York City. This is a gala fundraiser. It's on. It's a dinner with a cocktail hour, May 5th, Tuesday, May 5th.
Yes.
And I just recommend that you go to Women's eNews, look on the right side, and click on the gala. This is like a gathering of eagles. These are like amazing women here. I was going to say I know Julie Enzer because she's the editor of Sinister Wisdom. And I know Sally Roche Wagner because she did the Matilda Jocelyn Gage House for years. Amazing activist around women's history. But every woman here, it just looks like all different races, ages, and you've even got a token male there. You've got Arizona's online promoter of women's safety, Preston McMurray. So you've covered the whole gamut here. It's just New Yorkers, go to the gala on May 5th. It is at the Marriott in Central Park South.
Right, the Essex House. So but that's what this gala it communicates several things, but one of them is every issue is a women's issue, right?
Yes.
And so I'm just looking at the list, whether it's political power, and I'm looking at Gita, who has created a different economic system for poor women in India, in which you would get social credits, social capital credits, if you help out in the community, and you can use those to pay your electric bill or your doctor bill. And you're like, oh my God, somebody figured out how to pay women for the work they do. Sharon D'Agostino, who is very active in reducing maternal mortality worldwide. And Preston, our guy, what he did was create a database of all the domestic violence shelters in the U.S. and put it online, so you can type in your zip code and get the phone number of the domestic violence shelter nearest you.
Why wasn't that done 20 years ago, 30 years ago? That stuns me that that's a recent initiative. And I just want to interject
and a private initiative.
That yes, that's astounding. But I want to point out that there was a national database for stolen vehicles a decade or more before there was a national database for missing children. And that, to me, tells you something about who's in power and what they value. You could go online and search Impalas and try to find out, all the stolen Impalas, and maybe yours is turning up somewhere. But you could not do that with a child that was missing. And that's kind of what I'm thinking when you're telling me about that it's 2015 and we're just now getting a national database, a searchable database of domestic violence shelters resources. It's just this is and the other thing I wanted to bring up about the Women's eNews that we were talking about was that I was saying that when I read the news daily, it's kind of a combination because my friends are all activists, so I'll go on Facebook and they've cherry-picked the stories around the world, usually atrocities against women and girls, and also combined with environmental devastation, fracking, pipelines. And so then I'm just so relieved when the kitten video turns up because, I will watch anything. I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed with despair, with the huge why bother, which I think when I'm watching the kitten video, I'm kind of in why bother mode. And you made a point of saying that the Women's eNews, understanding this overwhelm factor, has a focus on optimism. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think, we're aware of the atrocities, of the multiple rapes and the campus rape and the reports and, the domestic violence and all that. We're aware of that, but also we cover the pushback. And if you're pushing back, and I think that all of our 21 leaders, I'm looking at Dorothy Davis, who raises money for the market women of Liberia. Now, who has it tougher, right? But the market, but they're organized, and Dorothy is helping raise money so that they can build a better market and make more money for their family. There's all this pushback, and it's the pushback that we're so grateful for. And yeah, and that's what gives us optimism, is that yes, there are Scud missiles. Are they Scud or whatever? There's drones. Yes, there's a plastic bag island in the Pacific somewhere. But people are doing stuff and advocating and making things happen. And this next generation, the one is in their 20s, they're fabulous. So, yep, I'm optimistic.
Well, and I think that it's important. I remember reading a biography of Dag Hammarskjöld, and he was saying that his mother taught him to read the newspaper. You lay it out flat on the table, and you stand about 3 feet away from it, and you just kind of read it like that and turn it rapidly because of that overwhelm factor. And
yes.
But I think that I'm sitting here looking at the women's eNews, and it's not sensational. It's not. And there is an optimism that pervades all the articles, even when you have the ones about, one of the stories today is the UK cutbacks or shrinking routes for escaping violence.
Yes.
But it's like, to me, the spin is, okay, what are we going to do about that? You know, or what are the options now? And I think,
it's a call to action.
Exactly, and a call to action is a little bit different than what the hell, it's too late for the planet anyway. You know, so I'm just going to get mine and, watch the kitten videos. Yeah, I think it's in. I see that today's feature, as we're speaking, has changed. Can 50 Shades of Grey pass the Bechdel test? And of course, that's that wonderful test of like, do women talk to each other about something other than boy? Well, first off, is there more than one woman in the film? That kind of thing. But that's a very playful approach to a film that's certainly getting an enormous amount of coverage. And then I see in your headlines that Bill Cosby has been accused by 2 more women who have spoken out. Yeah, I'm just so thrilled. I was a big follower of Women's eNews when you first started, and then I think I just kind of got sucked into Facebook, and by the time I'm done with Facebook, I can't take anymore. I think I need to open the Women's eNews in the morning before Facebook.
Yes. Although we're on Facebook, so if you go to our Facebook page first, click on the story. Tell everybody, I'm not quite sure. If you like us on Facebook, does that mean that you get our feed?
I think that when you post something, I believe if somebody has liked your Facebook page, I think it will show up in our, in our feed. That your stories will show up.
Anyway,
so
we're
go
there.
to our Facebook page
Twitter.
and like them. But if they sign up,
like us.
What happens if you sign up on your website, which is for free? What happens then?
Right. You get a daily email that has today's feature. Unfortunately, you do not get these updates that's across the top of our page. It's called Breaking News. And we're going through a redesign of everything because you have to stay fresh. And the breaking news is going to be more prominent. That the features we write ourselves with freelance writers, and the breaking news is why can't I think of the word? But we pick up other news stories and other news sources that have to do with women's rights or women's well-being, and we post those. So it's a way of knowing what's going on, not only what we can do, but what other journalists. And when I said I was going to change journalism, that's what happened. And, I don't know if I could take much credit or a lot of credit or no credit, but
Well, I'm very
complicated.
interested in the process. So Clinton is going
Yeah.
on, and you're seeing the system that enabled you to survive and thrive is going away for other
Right.
women. So you want to start this organization, and at this point the internet is really not that old. I remember people were sort
No.
of starting to go online in 96, and you started this paper in 2000, so it was kind of
Yeah.
within the 5-year window of when the average person on the street started to jump on. What were the steps that you took?
Well, as I would say, I was freelancing, and then, basically going hungry because I'm a lousy freelancer, and nobody was interested in the kind of journalism I wanted to do about, women's issues. And that story I did about the counties keeping the money got me fired. So I was looking for a job, and now Legal Defense and Education Fund got a major gift, and that to create an online news service. And so they created a business plan, and then they went to look for somebody. And I got a letter at my home because I had attended a conference there about the media, and I'm like, yeah, this would be my job.
You had that little, little foresight, like a deja vu.
Yeah.
I think I'm already in this position.
Yeah. So they hired me, and I had what a moment, right? I had a blank computer screen. It's like I create a website that covers news, and I read their business plan, and I knew that it wouldn't work, so I tossed that out. And
now wait a minute, back it up. This is what women need to know. I wrote a business plan, and then I knew it wouldn't work, and I tossed it out. See, a lot of women would think, I don't know how to write one, so I won't, and I'll just give up. Or I wrote one, but it's bad, so I'll give up. I love, you wrote one, it was bad, you threw it out, and you just kept going. That's wonderful. What was bad about your business plan?
They wrote one, it was bad, they threw it out. But mine, exactly, so I didn't know how to write a business plan either. But the now Legal Defense and Education Fund, this will fast forward, after 9/11, they took a big hit financially, and they decided to lay us off. So I was hired in 99, and so this is the fall of 2011, and they decided they can't afford us anymore, they're going to shut us down. And I decided to spin us off. I mean, why I decided to do that, I have no idea. Because it was just outrageous. But on the other hand, I wasn't going to let this go. So then I wrote a business plan. And how did I do that? Well, I was cleaning my room the day after Thanksgiving, and I came across this book that a friend had bought me years ago, How to Write a Business Plan.
I love it.
And it's at Staples. I mean, right? You can.
Yeah.
And so I said, I'm a journalist, and I can follow directions. And so I wrote a business plan. And one of the things that it asks you to do is to anticipate your revenue and your expenses over the next 5 years. I did not have a clue.
I wouldn't either. I mean, it was such.
Yeah.
Well, this was after the .com bust or before it?
After. And
at that point, I would have felt completely like, oh, hell, I don't know.
Exactly. So I just made it up. It said fill out these, I said, so, okay. So I did my best guess. That's all a business plan is your best guess. And then people can read it, and they're like, well, this is realistic. Like, if I had said in my business plan that I was going to survive on advertising revenue, they would know that that wasn't going to work because it still hasn't worked. Advertising revenue is not online, doesn't work like it does in print. And so they would know that my business plan wouldn't work. But I had a different business plan, which I made up that weekend, which is that we would have major events, which the gala is one. We would attract individual donors, which we have. We would solicit Foundation grants, which we did and we have received, and we would ask our readers to donate, which we do, and we get a little bit of income from smaller events and advertising, about $5,000 a year from advertising.
So, what is your readership?
Well, exactly. Well, how it's like depends on how you count it, but like 1 million visitors in a year. I think they call them uniques. Mm-hmm. Then we have about 50,000 subscribers to the daily news story. Then we have about 50,000 followers on Twitter. And Facebook, I think it's like 7,000 or 8,000 likes, which means that it goes all over Facebook.
Uh-huh.
So it's a lot. We have a lot of readership, and in every available medium. And I just wrote a memo today, and if there's a new medium of communication, we have to be there too.
So so you're able to hire full-time staff members?
Absolutely.
That's wonderful.
That's why you have a business plan.
Yeah, exactly. I am someone without a business plan, and it has definitely been a feast or famine situation. Yeah, well, I think that's just such a lovely story that that you had a vision, and then you had this help from now, and then they took it all away, and instead of just drowning your sorrows, you rolled up your sleeves, wrote a business plan, and you went out on your own with it. And so is it a nonprofit organization?
It is it's a 501c3. So any donation would be tax deductible.
Well, we have about 2 more minutes, I see, on the clock here. What I wanted to, yes, that's a wonderful place to kind of sort of end it. Go sign up. Donate if you feel so inclined. If you're in New York, check out this gala, because I just feel like being in the room with these amazing people is going to just be
awesome.
Yes, I think it's going to be a wonderful networking thing, but also just kind of go stand in their aura and upload. So I'll have what she's having. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And when we talk about sustainability, there's several leaders are really committed to a sustainable environment, and if you're going to really create a sustainable environment, guess what? You have to include women in the planning.
Well, I see this. I see one of the biggest tools. We talked about this earlier. Is like when women fought so hard to get the vote. One of the reasons men opposed them was they were absolutely sure that it wouldn't be business as usual, that the first thing women would do would be organize a separate women's party, and then they would really be, out of luck. There'd be huge reform and a complete upheaval of values. None of that happened. Well, ladies got the vote, and just that meant they could, vote the way their husbands did. Or they could, lobby the usual male suspects for just a little something for the ladies. And I have always felt like what a lost opportunity. Was everybody so exhausted after they got suffrage they just couldn't even envision a women's party? But to me, we need that. We need for women to not be shy that we're different and that we have different focus, different needs, different values, and thank you for picking up on the maternal mortality rates, and I thank Dr. Kelsey for stopping thalidomide distribution in the United States because she actually cared about fetal testing. I mean, I think that women are different, and to me, if the planet's going to be sustainable, it will be because women are in power, and they're not going to be in power if they don't have a networking organ for talking to each other about our issues, about what we care about and what's important. And so far as I can tell, Women's eNews is really poised to be a vehicle like that. And the fact that your focus is not doom and gloom and ain't it awful, but it's upbeat, it's optimistic, it's that you're engaging what Alice Walker calls resistance is the secret of joy. And I think opening your email in the morning to the eNews, yes, it's about the pushback. And that's the secret of joy. I feel like this is a sustainable way for women to stay engaged in a fight that too easily can just fill us with despair and overwhelm.
Yeah, exactly. So
do you have any?
I'll just say thank you.
Yeah. Any final words you want to say about your experience or your stories or your wonderful eNews organization?
You have to stay informed to have the power. And when you say the women's vote is not powerful enough, women are not informed enough about their issues. So read Women's eNews and stay informed.
Yes. All right. Well, I think that I know we've come to the end of the hour, and I just want to express my gratitude. This has been Rita Henley Jensen, and I'm going to turn this back over to Jenny now.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you both very much. Rita Henley Jensen, and thank you to Carolyn Gage. Thank you both. And you can find out more about Rita's work and news on topics important to us as women and as citizens of a changing world at womensenews.org. She has pages on maternal health, on raising the volume on maternal mortality in the United States, and a series on Black maternal health in New York City. Subscribe to Women's eNews. It's free at womensenews.org. And you can subscribe and sign up for Carolyn's newsletter at carolyngage.com. Carolyn tours in her own shows and is available for lectures and workshops on lesbian culture and history. Thank you again, Rita Henley Jensen and Carolyn Gage. And thank you for listening in. Thank you, Rita. And thank you, everyone, for listening in. We hope we have informed and inspired you in many ways. We hope that you will try to catch more of these interviews in the series on feminism and sustainability, as well as our other podcast series on issues important to us as women. And please share these interviews with your family and friends. You never know who you may be inspiring. No matter what your description or experience of feminism is, we hope to have heightened your understanding of feminism's important role in all aspects of sustainability, and restored and strengthened your resolve to build alliances for the future. For it is clear that none of us are really alone. Keep listening. Bye for now.